Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sun Life Asset Management's Bright Talk series. This is our third installment for the year, no? And by the way, my name is John, and I'm from the online distribution channel. I will be hosting this morning's session. So today, as I've mentioned, we're going to be having third installment of the series, which will be focused on balance funds, no? But before we get into that, for those of you who are not yet familiar, would like I'd like to introduce our company. No, so Sun Life Asset Management is the investment arm of Sun Life Philippines. No, it's a wholly subsidiary owned by Sun Life Financial Philippines. We are committed to be every Filipino's partner in their pursuit of prosperity. Okay, so we have been advocating for financial prosperity since the year 2000 through advice, wealth solution, and service. So currently, we are managing 16 prosperity funds with a total of 168.8 billion assets under management. This is as of October 22, 2021. So we also liaise with our global asset management companies. So Sun Life actually covers a full suite of funds now. So we have funds for everyone, whatever risk spectrum, may you be a long-term investor, a short-term investor, a conservative or an aggressive investor. No, so we have funds like the Peso starter funds for those who are in the more conservative side. We also have more aggressive funds, equity-laced funds like the index fund and the equity fund, which we also did a fund in focus session in early, a couple of months ago. But for this morning, as we've mentioned, we'll be covering those in the middle of the pack, and we call this our balance funds now. So in the screen, we're showing you our Philippine peso denominated funds, but we also have dollar denominated funds. So it's the same. It's the same for our dollar funds. We have different funds in every risk spectrum. As mentioned, today we'll be covering our balance funds, and we have a couple, no? So we have the plain balance fund. We also have achievers, the achiever funds, which have three types of funds: the 2028 fund, the 2038 fund, and the 2048 fund. We also have $2 balance funds, which is the Wellspring Fund and the Dollar Advantage Fund. So to help us understand what these balance funds are all about, we invited Jerome Lim from our business development team, and he will be helping us understand the features of these funds. No, so good morning, Jerome. Are you there?
Good morning, John.
Morning.
Thanks for that introduction. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us in our third Fund in Focus session, the series where we discuss the different types of mutual funds. Now, if this is your entry point into the series, maybe you'd stand to benefit from a quick explanation as to how mutual funds work. So I'll give you a quick summary. Investors buy shares of a mutual fund, and their money is in turn then used by the mutual fund company, in this case that's Sun Life Asset Management, to invest in different types of assets. Now, mutual fund shares are affected by the performance of these assets. If these assets are performing well, increasing in value, this will also be reflected in the share price. But conversely, if the assets are going down in value, this will also be affected in or reflected in the share price. It's important to note that mutual funds are non-guaranteed return products, and there are some risks involved in investing in them. And before I continue on, I'd like to encourage everyone to use the Q&A button, ask any questions you have, and we'll tackle them later in the Q&A. All right. So some of the benefits of investing in a mutual fund, first of which is diversification. Now, if you're to invest on your own, you're limited to your own disposable income, and chances are you limited to a number of assets that you can invest in. But if you invest in a mutual fund that has billions of pesos in assets under management, you have instant access to a wide array of investments. Professional management, I know we're all busy with our jobs, our obligations, our duties. We don't have enough time necessarily to, let's say, research the stock market and which stocks to pick, that you can leverage on the experience on the fund managers, and they do the research for you and select which stocks to invest in. Low minimum investment, we'll get to that later on as we share the minimum investment amounts for our funds. Liquidity, so anytime that you need your money from your investments, the mutual fund company stands ready to buy back your shares. So you don't have to look for a buyer for mutual funds. And potentially high returns. As with any investments, we're really looking for growth potential in them. And we can share with you later our outlook. All right. So since today we'll be talking about balanced funds, these are mutual funds that are invested in both fixed income and equities. We have to talk about the type of assets. So first of which is fixed income. And basically, if you read through the description here, it's an investment security that pays investors fixed interest or dividend payments until its maturity date. Wow, parang sa accounting lang when we're reading out descriptions of types of investments. But I like to summarize it in this way. If you're the government or a large corporation and you need funds, let's say for a project, you can borrow from a bank or you can borrow from the public by issuing bonds. So either the government or these corporations will issue these bonds, which are purchased by retail investors. And why would they want to do that? Basically, because in exchange for loaning the money to them, you will be receiving interest in the form of coupons. So this type of asset gives you a steady stream of income. And this is usually for investors with a very conservative risk profile. So as you can see here, the description, capital preservation is my main priority because after the maturity of the bonds, the principal is then returned to you and you get to enjoy the steadiest stream of income in the form of coupon payments during the term of that bond. So last point here is I avoid volatility. It's really for conservative investors. All right, the other type of asset class that balanced funds invest in are equities or stocks. So I'm sure some of you here in this webinar are already familiar with stocks. Maybe some of you have your own stock portfolios, invest through a brokerage like Paul Financial. But for the benefit of those who are hearing about stocks for the first time, basically what stocks are of ownership of companies. So whenever you buy a stock, you buy a piece of that company. Now, why would you want to do that? Basically, what you think will happen is this company that you're investing in, over time, they will become more valuable. Either they'll sell more products, offer new services, and their revenues and prices will increase, and profits, sorry, will increase over time. Thus, your share in that company or ownership of that company will be more valuable over time. So, one important thing to note about stocks or equities, it's a high risk type of asset as the prices of stocks fluctuate on a daily basis. So there is some volatility when you invest in the stock market. Now, for those of you, sometimes if you are in the mood to read the newspapers and then you happen to flip to the business section, you can see here usually the PSEI increases by X percent or declines by a certain percentage. The the PSEI basically is a benchmark of the Philippine stock market. So it's a good indicator as to how the stock market is performing. It's consisted of the top 30 companies. Some of their logos you can see here on the screen. I'm sure you avail of their products and services. And the PSEI again is the standard measure of the performance of the local stock market. Now I want to give you an example of the performance of the stock market over a 10-year period. So starting 2011 until September this year. So as you can see here, I mentioned earlier that the stock market experiences volatility or fluctuations in its prices. And this is reflected in this graph. There are periods where the stock market is rallying and the prices are up, and periods when the market corrects. Uh, but one thing that you should note when investing in the stock market, since it's a high risk asset class, is it's really for those investors who have a longer term period investment horizon. So we're talking 5 years and up. So you're able to ride the volatility and also benefit from the higher potential growth in investing in stocks. So if you look at the 10-year return of the PSEI, that's 73.84%. Again, that's from a period of September 30, 2011 until September 30 this year. And if you annualize that, that's roughly around 5.7%. Okay, moving on. I just like to stress here that equities investors, they're really those with an aggressive risk profile. And they really want to maximize the potential growth of their investment or their money over a long-term period. And we define that period as over 5 years. They believe in the saying high risk, high return, and volatility, is something that they expect or they can live with their investment in the stock market. Okay, so balanced funds, which is our theme today, they're a mix of both fixed income and equity investments. So if you recall, fixed income is for conservative investors, equity is more aggressive. Since it's a mix of both, it's really a balance or the midpoint for those two types of investors. So here I've arranged in ascending order from left to right in terms of risk appetite and time horizon. At the very left, these are the more conservative funds, the money market, the starter funds that we discussed in the previous fund and focus session. And at the right-hand side, these are more on equities, so for aggressive investors. And balanced fund, as I've mentioned, you'll find them in the middle. Okay, so the first balanced fund that I want to talk about in our suite of products is the Peso Prosperity Balanced Fund. So as I've mentioned about balanced funds, they're invested in both the stock market equities, you see here around 60%, and fixed income, both corporate and government bonds, that's around 25%. And the rest is cash to serve our liquidity requirements in case people want to buy their shares from sell their shares, from the fund. So the description here, it's a mix of fixed income and equity securities. And the benefit really is to provide you the safety and stability of fixed income securities and still enjoy the growth potential of that stock or equities component of the fund. Quick scan here of our top equity holdings. Again, these are companies that are reputable, that have been around for a long time, and chances are you avail of their products and services. So you can also find here at the lower left corner of the screen, the link. If you need more information on these funds, feel free to click through, and you can even scan our fund fact sheets and performance for this balanced fund. Okay, the next mutual fund that I want to discuss in our offering are our Sun Life Achiever funds, and we have 3 of these. So these are target dated mutual funds, and let's tackle that first part of the statement. Target dated, it's a type of mutual fund that aims to maximize the growth of its assets over a specified period of time. So we have 3: Achiever 2028, 2038, and 2048. And the goal of this mutual fund is to generate long-term capital appreciation or growth potential. It's invested in a mix of both equities, stocks again, and fixed income securities. And one important feature of target date funds is they tend to follow what is called a glide path. So if you can look here at the graph, at the start of or the inception of the fund, it's more heavily invested in equities to maximize growth potential. Since you're a long way off from the target date, You can be more a bit uh, aggressive in terms of your investing. And then over time, as we near the target date, we lower some of the equity component and shift it to fixed income, a more conservative approach as the target date approaches. Now, one of the reasons why you would want to invest in a target date fund is you have a specific goal in mind. And one of the most common goals for our investors in our achiever funds, it's usually retirement. So let's say the average age of the attendees in today's session is 25. Maybe you'd like to look at Achiever 2048 for your retirement in the future. Or if you have a goal that's a bit that you want to achieve sooner than 2048, thankfully we have 2028 and 2838 there. All right. So as I mentioned, it is a type of balance fund, but at the beginning, the mix is more heavily skewed towards equities or stocks to maximize growth potential. And over time, you'll see here in the fund fact sheets, maybe in 2038, 48 down the road, more of that component will be allocated to fixed income. And again, here, the company names, only the top companies that we invest in. Again, if you want more info on our funds, feel free to click through the link. I think someone is typing it in the chat for more info on the Achiever funds, 2028, 2038, and 2048. All right, so we've tackled basically all of the peso balanced funds in Sun Life's offering. Now let's talk about our dollar funds. And we have two, and they're both global fund of funds, meaning what our fund manager does is they select offshore mutual funds to invest in. So these are mutual funds in different markets or different countries scattered across the globe. So the Wellspring Fund is a bit more conservative with more of the allocation into fixed income, and Dollar Advantage Fund is more invested in equities as compared to Wellspring. Okay, but the Wellspring has one unique feature. It pays out dividends from the fund's retained earnings in the form of shares. Uh, the declaration of dividends is something that is not guaranteed, but our track record so far is that we've been consistently declaring dividends for the Wellspring Fund. That's typically around November. And these are just some of the offshore mutual fund companies that we invest in. If you're familiar with the global landscape when it comes to investing, you'd be these names would be very familiar to you. BlackRock, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, PIMCO. And if you look here at the right-hand side of the screen, the geographical allocation, we are invested in a lot of markets. So one of the things that we share to our clients who ask whether it's good to invest offshore or just stay in the Philippine market, diversification. If you're invested only in the Philippines in terms of country exposure, that's 100% Philippines. But if you invest in a fund that is globally diversified, you're able to spread out that country risk. Okay. And then the Dollar Advantage Fund, very similar to the Wellspring Fund, except it does not pay out dividends. And it's more heavily invested in equities. So around 65% is in equities, almost 30% in fixed income, and the rest in cash or cash equivalents. Okay. Now, just a quick slide on our fund returns for our balance funds. As you can see here, for our Achiever funds, we don't have 5 and 10-year returns for this one yet, since these target date funds were launched in late 2019. All right, so some considerations when it comes to selecting which fund to invest in. One of the most important things to consider is your investment horizon. Now, I know I've been mentioning investment horizon since the start of my presentation. But just to briefly explain what that is, it's basically how long you can set aside that money. So for those who invest in balanced funds, our prescribed investment horizon is 5 years and up. So be sure that any money that you invest in the balanced fund is something that you won't need for emergency purposes. And you would you would be able to set them aside to maximize its growth potential. All right, so that's the first consideration, investment horizon. The next is risk appetite. And we mentioned the different types of assets, fixed income for conservative, equities for aggressive, balanced for both. It's important to note your risk appetite when it comes to investing. And of course your financial situation. And it's closely tied with the investment horizon when I mentioned that the funds that you invest, hopefully in the mutual funds, aren't something that you will need in the next 3 to 6 months for emergency purposes or whatever obligation you may have. So take these three factors into consideration before you invest. And this here is my last slide. It's a very quick presentation, but later I'll be back for the Q&A. I just wanted to illustrate my point through this example. So let's say you have 1,000 pesos that you can set aside every month and invest. And you do that regularly, religiously for as long as you can. Well, here in this example, until the age of 65, sorry. And you do this every month. If you start at the age of 25, assuming a 10% growth on your investment per annum, by the time you turn 65, you would have 3.5 million pesos. If you start 10 years later, the figure now becomes 1.3 million pesos. Start even later at 45, so that's around 20 years of investing, and that figure is just 522,000. So the point that I want to illustrate here is that when it comes to investing, it's better to start sooner rather than later. And the earlier you begin your investment journey, chances are the more that you can rely on to be in your account by the time that you need your money. All right, that ends my presentation on balance funds. I'd like to turn it back to John. We'll discuss a few things. Thanks, John.
Hello, sorry. I think I was on mute now. So thank you, Jerome, for that discussion. Now, I think I'd just like to ask, could you share with us, please, how much the minimum investment is for the balance funds or the funds that we discussed?
Sorry, John, that's 1,000 pesos
1,000, right? For it's actually 1,000 for the
for the
balance
peso.
funds and the achiever funds, and for the dollar funds, it's 1,000 USD. Is that
1,000
correct?
as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
Correct.
Sige. So thank you again, Jerome. So Jerome will be back with us later for the Q&A session. So for those of you who have questions, please type them in the chat box in the Q&A pod rather, in the Q&A pod now. So while you type in your questions, we actually also have some questions for you. No? So siguro we can do a quick learning check to see if we were able to absorb what Jerome discussed earlier. Okay, so we will be launching 3 questions. Let me launch the poll now, and then we'll give you siguro a couple of mga 2 minutes to answer. No? So the first question is, balance funds invest purely in the stock market. So I hope that you can answer that. Is that true or false? Ayan. Tapos yung next question natin, I think fairly easy questions, no? The Sun Life Achiever funds follow a glide path. So this was also discussed by Jerome earlier. And then finally, yung last question natin, last learning check question, which is the more aggressive mutual fund? So we have $2 funds. So out of those two, which is the more aggressive mutual fund? Is it the dollar Wellspring Fund or the Dollar Advantage Fund? And I think we already have around 40% have answered. So I hope siguro will give some more time, a few more seconds to those who can answer. Siguro I'll end it now and then I'll share the results. Okay. So for the first question, balance funds invest purely in the stock market. Um, 78% answered false. No? So yung discussion natin earlier, so if you would remember, balance funds are actually a mix of both equities and fixed income investments. No? Number two, the Sun Life funds follow a glide path. And wow, this is impressive. 100% actually answered this correctly. It's actually true. No? So this was what Jerome, this was the diagram earlier depicts. This is what it depicts. No? So as mentioned, the target date fund, the achiever funds, follow that glide path. And then as it approaches the target date, as the years go by, it actually reallocates most of the equities that are it invests into more conservative fixed income securities. Okay? And then finally, I think ito yung pinaka-challenging question out of the three, no? Which is the more aggressive mutual fund? Is it the Dollar Wellspring Fund or the Dollar Advantage Fund? It's actually the Dollar Advantage Fund because we also showed earlier dun sa diagram natin, we have two pies, no? And there we can see that the Dollar Wellspring Funds neutral allocation is actually more geared towards the fixed income, no? So for the Dollar Wellspring Fund, it's 70% fixed income, which is more conservative. And then for the Dollar Advantage, it's only 60% fixed income. So meaning since mas conservative yung fixed income and mas madaming allocation ng Wellspring, Advantage is the more aggressive mutual fund. Okay, so siguro I'll also share na lang siguro the key points and the key takeaways that we have for this morning. Basically, we learned that the balance funds are a mix of fixed income and equity investments, and these are really for investors who are in the midterm, no, midpoint of the risk spectrum. So basically these are for the investors who would like, to have more returns, potential returns that are greater than a typical bond fund, but would also would want to have more security, diba? Kasi as we know, equity funds and index funds are the most aggressive type of funds that we have. So if you would want to lace that with fixed income, some fixed income, so you have a little bit more protection, you can consider the balanced funds. Okay. And then this is also for investors who probably have a medium to long term investment horizon. Probably not for investors who have very conservative very conservative risk profiles and very short time horizons, no. And also probably not for those who have really really long time horizon, because the risk there is if you invest with a short time horizon, the fund is more volatile than, diba, our starter funds, our money market funds. And when you have to redeem, you could actually be, losing money. Kung very risky or very long term ka naman and you invest in balance fund, you could be losing out on some potential returns then. So ideally you have a medium term time horizon. And then as we confirmed then earlier, the minimum investment actually to start, just to get your skin in the game, for the peso funds, the peso balance funds, it's just 1,000 pesos. You can do this online. And then for the USD naman, probably good for, diba, if we have some OFW families who have dollar savings, dollar time deposits, you can probably allocate some of the savings there and consider also our dollar mutual funds for your diversification of investments, no. Siguro a final some tips from me then is this is actually what we really espouse here in Sun Life is to make goal-based investments, no. And what do we mean by this? You can actually take advantage of our digital platforms, our client portal, and our mobile app. And then when you actually invest with Sun Life, you get access to this, no. Even if just 1,000 pesos, you already get access to the online account. And then there you can actually assign values or assign labels to your mutual funds, no. So kunyari, let's say you have a goal. Let's say, as Jerome mentioned earlier, you have a goal in retiring, let's say in 20 years or in 30 years. You can invest in, let's say, in the Achiever Fund 2028, and then you can put a name there. You can label it and say, this is my retirement fund. So what this actually does is it psychology is a very big factor in investing and mutual, in the investing world. This actually prevents us from, let's say, diba, touching or getting a few, parang withdrawing from the fund, because we know what it's for. Sorry, we know what it's for. Okay? So speaking of our digital platforms, we actually have a different suite, no, of digital platforms for you. So if you are interested in opening an account, you can go to bit.ly/slamcy online. And then also for our existing clients, we also have a suite of platforms, no, or features and programs that you could take advantage to top up your account. So siguro if you want, you could also take a screenshot of this so that you can visit them, or you can take advantage of them. Okay. And then siguro, for example, no, if you are, let's say, not yet a Slamsy client and you would want, or you are already considering um trying or signing up for a fund, you can simply go to our website. Like, we linked some of the links in the chat box earlier. And then you could go to, let's say, for example, bit.ly/slamsy balance. And then this would take you to the product page of the mutual fund, no. And in the mutual fund product page, there would be information related to the funds, no? So if you'd like to do more due diligence, you would like to do more research, you can actually click on these sheets. So we have the fund fact sheet here, the fund prospectus, which documents everything about the fund, no, and even a product highlight sheet. So you can really check where the fund invests in, when was it incorporated, how much is the fund worth, about what are its allocations. But if you're already interested, you can simply click on the buy now button, and then you would only have to fill out an online form, and then the fund will already be open for you. We actually will show you a quick video to show you how simple it is now.
Want to start investing in the Sun Life Prosperity Funds? It takes only a few steps. Go to www.sunlifefunds.com to know the different types of mutual funds available. When you find the mutual fund that fits you best, click Buy Now. Accomplish the online application page. Upload a clear photo of a valid government ID with signature. Read the terms and conditions. Click Agree to accept. Review your order details. Select the mode of payment. That's it. Easy, right? A confirmation of your subscription will be sent via SMS or email. Congratulations! You're now officially a Sun Life Prosperity Funds investor.
Hi, John. Sorry, unmute again.
And there. So it's really, thank you, Jerome. So it's really just like filling out basically an online form, no. Everything is completely online. And then we really would encourage you to consider starting an account now, because right now we have an ongoing promo. So if you invest at least 10,000 pesos, you would get a reward, no? So you can learn more about this online promo here. So you can visit bit.ly/online promo or 2021, or scan the QR code here in the screen. And then siguro two more announcements before we get to the Q&A. If you haven't joined, or haven't would like to have a refresher on how mutual funds work, our next session for the MF 101 is on November 9. You can also scan the QR code or go to the link shown in your screen to register. We'd also be sharing these links in the emails, in the attendee email that we'll be sharing now. And then finally, our next Fund in Focus session will be discussing the global funds, or rather the different Sun Life global funds that we have. So we have different funds, like you can actually already start investing globally even with peso, no? You don't necessarily need a dollar fund, a dollar, sorry, dollars to invest globally. So that's something that we're eager to discuss in our next Fun and Focus session, which would be on November 23. So you can also scan the QR code or go to this link. Ayan, finally, so we are in the last portion, no, of our session this morning, the Q&A. So if I could please invite Jerome back for the Q&A. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A pod. But siguro to start, no, my first question, Jerome, is we have seen the local economy, no, even the PSEI actually picked up in the last couple of days, or if not weeks, no. So siguro some of our attendees are wondering, is this still a good time to go in to invest, to start investing, or should we be pausing first and then probably waiting for a better opportunity, a better entry point? What do you think, Jerome?
Okay, thanks for that question, John. So, to those who may not know, the Philippines is really a consumer or consumption-driven economy.
Mm,
And one thing that really happens when we have spikes in COVID cases is we have mobility restrictions, nagkaka-ECQ, MECQ, and this really impacts the economy, and this really impacts the stock market. But something that we're looking forward to is recently the trend is we've been picking up our vaccination rates, continuing yung mga daily vaccinations, daily jabs, and the end result really, or what we really want to achieve, is a general reopening of the economy. And that we've seen that over the past few weeks, nung na-lift yung restrictions, nag-respond yung stock market, nag-rally, umakyat. And we want that trend to continue, and that's what we foresee happening. So
mm,
in terms of yung easing of restrictions, may positive impact yan over the long run sa stock market. So opportunity to invest. Another thing we're looking at is elections. Typically, during election time, we experience a spike in consumption, and of course, may impact yan sa stock prices. So these are factors to consider, that because of one, easing of mobility restrictions, continuation of vaccinations, two, elections, we still feel that there is upside sa stock market. In fact, yung forecast nga natin sa PSEI and next year and 2022 is 7,900. Currently, we're 7,200. So if you do the math, that's around a 9 to 10% upside.
mm,
So still a good opportunity to invest, and we're just talking about that less than 2-year period. Pero once the pandemic normalizes, the situation normalizes, and we can return to pre-pandemic levels, mas lalong may benefit pa yan to your investment. And in line naman yun eh. Because there's a question here about what is medium-term
yeah,
horizon.
mm,
So 5 years. 5 years is the answer. So if you're looking at the 5-year period to invest in, it's still a good time to invest, especially in the stock market.
yeah. It's good actually. That was actually my next question, Jerome. No, because I did also see that question in the Q&A pod. Um pero it's good that you highlighted na I guess for those who have really medium to long term investment horizon, you could actually, if you look at it in a perspective, our kumbaga, well, the PSEI level is still relatively low, not compared to where we were
The five years ago.
pre-pandemic. Yeah, 5 years ago. So, and hopefully, 'di ba? Hopefully when we begin to again pick up, as you mentioned, and if that's really our time horizon, then we will eventually also get to those levels again. Siguro question ko din, Jerome, would you have any recommendations in terms of strategies, like uh would you recommend our clients doing, let's say, a lump sum investment,
Okay.
or more of a cost averaging investment siguro?
Okay. So, I showed kanina yung chart ng PSEI and you saw there, it's not a straight line graph. May mga periods na mababa yung prices, may mga periods na mataas.
Mm-mm.
So, your risk here if you invest one time, big time, or lump sum is you're tied to one price. Pero pag umakyat pala siya, hindi mo kung bumaba pala siya, hindi mo na-capture yung mas murang price.
Mm-mm.
So, to avoid that risk of being tied to one price, what you mentioned na peso cost averaging, it's a strategy wherein you invest regularly.
Regularly, yeah.
So some
Even
they
in
do it
smaller ano lang.
periodically, diba, like quarterly. Pero if you have the disposable income, monthly talaga for me. Kasi it not only averages the cost of your shares, you're
Mm-mm.
able to accumulate pa and set that discipline inside of you to pay yourself first and to set aside for your investments before you even spend.
Mm-mm. And we also have different programs for that, no? Like the bills payment, which can actually be set as scheduled bills payment, 'di ba?
Correct.
Para ma-regularize talaga and maging hygiene talaga yung pag-invest. Siguro last na question na lang, Jerome, for more on the market um
Okay. Start with other
questions,
questions.
no? Yeah. May question here. NAVs of peso bond continues to go down. So, do you recommend switching it to the balance fund?
Okay. So, bond fund is really invested in fixed income. So, usually for conservative. So, maybe yung iba nagtataka bakit nagna-negative.
Mm-mm.
It's because when it comes to trading bonds, apart from yung interest or coupon, kailangan mo rin consider yung price ng bond.
Mm-mm.
Over time kasi, for example, if rates are expected to increase in the future, nagiging less valuable yung bond mo ngayon. Let's say, the coupon rate is 3% now. Tapos, you expect that the coupon rate for future bonds will be 5%. So, kung ikaw yung investor, mas gusto mo yung 5% kaysa 3%, di ba? So, by that virtue, bumababa yung value ng bond mo na 3%.
Mm-mm.
Pero if you hold it naman to maturity, pareho lang naman makukuha mo yung principal pati yung nakuha mong 3%. So may periods sa mga fixed income funds natin because mutual funds are marked to market. It takes into account yung bond prices. So may times nga na bumababa yung NAV dahil nahihila siya pababa ng prices ng bonds. Pero over time naman, nagna-normalize yun and the fund manager has their strategy naman. If they have extra cash, they invest in the higher return bonds. And na-normalize again yung NAV. So, yung mga periods na negative, madalang lang naman yan.
Mm-mm.
And if you have an investment in the bond fund and you're happy with, and you have an investment horizon, an investment goal, okay ka pa naman so far there, you can stay the course and stick to it and wait the NAV to return to normal.
Mm-mm. I guess really the bond funds right now are affected by the market rates, no? Especially since 'di ba, yung different governments are really interested in
Increasing
kumbaga,
interest
yeah,
rates.
correct. And also stimuli parang stimulating the economy since nga medyo bumaba nga siya yung activity natin during the pandemic. But I guess it's also good that you mentioned di ba, what was the original plan for investing in the bond fund? What was the original, kumbaga, also time horizon? Kasi let's say you're considering you only have like a shorter time horizon, and then you would consider the parang switching to the balance fund, which will have a longer time horizon, that could also be detrimental to the original goal. So siguro also assess that, like if you have a longer time horizon, then yes, definitely you can consider it. Pero kung even shorter time horizon siya, you can also consider siguro either staying the course or shifting to, let's say, a money market fund. No, that's one thing that you can consider, depending on your time horizon.
Correct, John. One other thing to consider, remember tayo mga tao, we grow, we evolve, we change. Nag-iiba rin yung investment objectives natin. So,
Correct.
if you're asking if you should switch your fund, baka naman kasi nag-iba rin kasi yung investment objective or yung profile. Nagkaroon ng additional disposable income, gusto mas aggressive. So, all of those factors na na-mention kanina nung portion ko, please take into consideration and regularly review your investments kung aligned pa rin yung objective mo sa purpose mo ng investing in the fund. Okay, my other
We have
question.
another question here, Jerome. Are mutual funds taxable daw ba?
Okay, so your gains on the mutual fund, capital gains yan eh. They're not taxed. Pero yung mutual fund company, sa pag-compute ng net asset value per share or NAV ng fund, may tax component na rin na kinoconsider yan. So, yung NAV naman is basically the assets of the fund over outstanding number of shares. So, kasama na rin sa assets minus liabilities. So, kasama na rin yung expenses like taxes. Pero you as the investor, pag nagbenta ka na ng share mo, kahit kumita ka ng 10%, let's say, hindi na mababawasan yung kita mo kasi wala mang capital gains tax.
Yes, and kumbaga also, at least for the investor, well, technically the fund itself is taxed, no, kasi it works like a corporation. But what is posted, actually what we actually also showed earlier, what is posted is already net of tax, no. So unlike, let's say, yung mga time deposits wherein yung interest rate will be posted, but then when you actually gain it, may withholding tax ka na 20%. Yung returns na posted for mutual funds are already, kumbaga, that's the full amount that you will be receiving, or
Correct.
the full
Net
rate,
na yan.
full rate. Yes, net na po siya. Correct. Siguro
Meron
yung
about credit card eh.
merong question about credit card. Pwede ba, Jerome, na mag-invest using credit card?
For now, hindi allowable yung credit card for investing. But we do have a lot of payment channels that you can take advantage of. John, would you like to share some of the payment
Yes,
channels?
we have different, no, we partnered with different banks. Actually, almost all of Philippine banks we have a collection account with. But yung really what we promote are yung mga bills payment. If you have BPI, BDO, Metro Bank, Security Bank, I think we have bills payment with those banks, or yung auto invest, if not bills payment. So you can take advantage of those. I think we also really don't encourage yung credit card investing at the moment, because technically yung credit card, it's still ano, diba?
Siya eh.
Loan, debt. So medyo siguro ang challenge lang doon, baka 'di ba may leveraging, or baka may mawilling mag-invest, and then baka hindi mabayadan yung yung credit card. That's why you also, as a company, don't encourage, kumbaga, using credit card as a payment method.
Correct. Ako, what I do, John, for topping up my account, meron na naman akong bills payment. Pero pag trip ko lang, minsan I just log on to my BPI app. Tapos, I funds transfer to Slamsi. Pare, gusto kong mag-invest 5,000 pesos. Tapos yung funds transfer na yun, siniscreenshot ko lang, and I can attach that as proof of payment.
Yes, pwede din naman yun.
Yun yung ginagawa.
Yeah.
So,
we have actually yung mga questions dito more on fund sorry,
How about
account
online?
account opening, no, hindi na sa ano sa hindi more on balance funds, no.
May
So
interesting question, John, about ano eh. Pag overseas ka, pwede bang mag-invest? May sagot ka
okay.
ba dyan?
Sige. So I think that was also a question dun, similar question dun sa ano, no, sa yeah, okay. We have a couple of questions relating to that. For overseas po, if you're currently abroad, no, unfortunately, we are required by the SEC na dapat yung applicant is in the Philippines. So what you can actually do is, if you go back dito sa Philippines, you can consider opening that account when you are here in the Philippines. Some of our clients, what they also do, 'di ba? If you, let's say you have a close relative or a close family member na who you trust, um like your spouse, let's say ganon, spouse, or like your eldest child, depende sa inyo. What they do is the close relative opens the account muna here under their name, and then listed na lang as third party, kumbaga third party, yung OFW. And then when the OFW comes back, or the worker comes back in the Philippines, pinapa-convert na lang nila into a joint account. So that one naman is allowed, no. But right now, if you are currently abroad, hindi po siya possible na mag-open ng account while you are abroad.
Open, John. Pero paano kung top up? Nabuksan na ni investor.
I think kailangan nasa Philippines ka din.
Okay. Clear
Ayun,
naman, clear naman.
yeah.
May
So,
question,
yun yung requirement kasi ng SEC, eh. So, we are following.
correct. May question dito, John. What will happen if the investors die?
Okay. So this is very similar lang naman din on, let's say, how if you have a bank account, how it works, no. So we have yung, kumbaga, it will go to the estate of the one who owned it, and then may claiming process naman doon yung mga legal heirs niya, 'di ba? So kung sino yung heirs niya, it will be processed under that. So I think very similar to how it works for a bank. But hindi naman siya itataguin ni Slamsy, if that's the question, no. It will go to your heirs naman. Ayun.
Okay.
So, ito, may we invest online to existing US dollar mutual funds. Yes,
Ano
actually,
mahilig
this is
ka?
a recent, siguro I can also take this, Jerome, no? So, this is a recent, for the longest time, yung available, kumbaga, platform lang natin for investing online, was through the Peso funds. But, very recently, we launched na rin yung online application for dollar mutual funds. However, yung method pa lang for funding it is still fund transfer dun sa collection banks ni Slampy. So I think we have several banks there, like RCBC, Citibank, BPI, BDO. So kung ano man yung bank na ginagamit mo, probably we also have a corresponding collection account. So you can transfer it there and then just upload it dun sa online application platform natin, and then that should also already be reviewed for processing. And then what are the requirements for investing in dollar funds? Actually, it's the same for all mutual funds. Na it's really just to fill out the investor information form. So yung mga basic information, like yung name mo, age, birthday. So similar if you've opened a bank account before. And then in terms of documentary requirements like IDs, we only need one primary valid ID. So kunyari, this will be if you have a passport, a UMID, even a voter's ID, that would also be accepted. May question din dito, Jerome. Although siguro itong iba, i-reserve na lang natin for the next
For
fund
the
and
global
focus
fund.
session. Correct. So medyo global funds questions sila. So one is asking for the historical returns of the wave, which is what we will be discussing next session. And then the other one naman is if they can invest raw internationally or in dollars using peso. So technically you can invest peso to peso lang siya, no, or dollar to dollar siya. So for our dollar funds, you mas, kumbaga, yung currency mo dapat is dollars din, and then for peso naman yung currency mo dapat na hawak is peso din. But we have a new fund which can allow you to invest globally kung baga, no, or you can invest in different in overseas market, overseas securities using peso. So and that one we will be discussing more in detail in the next fun and focus session.
Alright. Sige, para may teaser tayo for next month. For
Correct, correct.
next session, no?
Do we have other questions pa ba? Siguro ako last na lang, no, for siguro last two or last three questions. But ako na lang for the balance funds naman. Ako curious lang ako, Jerome. Since
Mhm.
yung achiever funds, I would like to hear your thoughts on this lang. Yung achiever funds kasi, they are balance funds, but some of them actually medyo really long term siya, no. May isa na 2048 pa, so that's like in 30 years, so it's very ideal for retirement. I would say you also mentioned this earlier, but we would also have 'di ba yung longer term funds natin, like let's say the equity fund or the index fund. So um ano kaya yung differences niya, and like if you could share to us like what should be the thought process between, let's say, if I'm someone who has a goal of retiring in 30 years, should I go for, let's say, an equity or an index fund or yung achiever fund na lang? What do you think?
Okay. So, for your specific example, si investor 30 years from now pa niya kailangan niyang pera.
Mm-mm.
Now, the client doesn't actually have to choose between the two funds. Yung maganda is, although mutual funds are ready to begin with, it's like a package of investments na it's a basket, pre-made basket of investments. You can add an extra layer of diversification by having multiple mutual funds. So, over the 30 years naman, si client might want the money, some of the money for a different purpose. For example, prior to retirement, gusto niyang bumili ng bahay or gusto niyang bumili ng kotse. So he or she can have a fund designated for that. First, they should look at the time horizon. Let's say si client, okay, 5 years from now, gusto ko bumili ng kotse. Maybe balance fund siya. Kasi medium term tayo kay balance fund, di ba?
Mm-mm.
Tapos 10 years from now, gusto ko bahay.
Mm-mm.
Hindi apart from the balance fund, meron siyang equity fund. Pero one of the goals that I want to fund is my retirement 30 years from now, which we have the Achiever 2048, depending na lang sa age ni client kung 2030 or 48. So it's good to have multiple funds for multiple objectives. And nakita mo naman, pinakita mo siya kanina sa screen mo about the app na may different funds for different goals. So ako, I personally advocate that kasi it's hard to just choose one fund. Tapos anytime you need money, pagkukuhanan mo siya, parang trinit mo siyang bank account.
Correct.
So
Agree.
maganda rin to segregate your money and invest in different type of funds based on your different goals.
I agree, Jerome. No? So thank you for sharing that. And I think, well, ako personally, the way I look at it, kasi if 30 years pa naman, diba? Retirement 30 years siya. Still, mas conservative pa din yung achiever funds, I would say. Because nga, the way that the fund works, kumbaga ano siya kumbaga nag-reallocate siya to fixed income. Kasi the thing about kasi the pure equity funds or pure index fund, it's hanggang 30 years siya. Ano siya it's still in the pure equities. So what do I mean by that? So pwedeng all the while like naghihintay tayo 29 years it's going up. Pero on the 30th year kung kailan ka magre-retire, nagka-pandemic na naman, 'di ba? And bumagsak yung market. So there's still a risk to that na let's say kung ano man yung na-gain mo over the years because of the nature of the volatility of the stock market, pwedeng on the year na magre-redeem ka, bumagsak yung stock market and you can lose some of that gains, no? But siguro that's more hedged with achiever funds because target date niya talaga 2048. So by 2048, actually it's essentially parang a money market fund na, no?
Or
So
fixed income na talaga.
yes, hindi na siya kumbaga dapat talaga maging kumbaga mag-fluctuate, and what you have there would probably be more stable and consistent. So that's also one way I would look at it. And that would also depend on kumbaga the risk profile and the personality of the investor. And as you mentioned also good thing din yun na we have different funds for different goals. Siguro last two questions. Last we have a question here. How about po yung Growth Plus Fund?
Growth Plus Fund is a Slockly product.
Lockly product.
So meaning
So,
it's a type of fund that are insurance products they invest in. So kasi si VUL may halo siyang insurance component
insurance.
and investment component. Si Growth Plus is one of those investment outlets. So si
Yeah.
mutual fund naman, purely new
Investments.
investment lang siya.
Mm-mm.
And
So we're not actually very familiar with this, Jerome, no, with the Growth
correct.
Plus Fund. It's not a slamsy product. So, ayun. Yun po. It's a sloppy product. It's an insurance product. And then parang
Nasagot
wala
niya yung
na akong,
medium term.
yeah, parang wala nang
Ikaw, John, do you
may
have any
question pa ba
advice
kayo?
for investors?
Ako
Na
really ako this is just my personal my personal way of looking at things. My number one category talaga for choosing a fund is the investment horizon. So more than risk appetite, um personally lang my number one goal is investment horizon. So I take a look first. I really follow yung goal based investing, no. So kunyari I take a look, what am I saving for? What am I investing for? So if it's for retirement, it's probably a long term thing, 'di ba? Probably 20-30 years from now. And then kung shorter siya, let's say trip abroad or probably 2 to 3 years. And then that's how I take a look then. So yung pinakita mo, Jerome, na 'di ba, na slide earlier, yung different funds, and then short term, return, risk, and then also more risk, more aggressive, more conservative. Yun yung fina-follow ko na strategy for investing.
thanks for that, John. Tama naman, paulit-ulit tayo, pero important, I think, talaga yung lesson na yun for finding the right fit for you in terms of investment objective. Ako naman yung tip ko before we end, since wala naman additional questions. When it comes to personal finance, budget talaga. And of course, if you want to invest, that presupposes na meron kang investable funds. Wag sana ihalo-halo lahat na all of your money is in your investment. Kasi we also have needs for emergency requirements, and mahirap nang mag-withdraw sa investment mo, especially when it's down, for your liquidity needs. So, good to have an emergency fund, build that up, tapos yung extra, yun yung invest nyo kasi yun yung kaya mong hindi galawin over the long-term period of, let's say, 5 years, 10 years onwards. Yun lang naman.
Thanks, Jer. So I think that's it for this morning, no. Well, siguro final reminders na lang from us. We'd love to hear feedback from you, no, regarding on how this session today went. So if you can answer the short survey after this session, we'll be grateful for that.
And if
Okay.
nakatulong mo yung session na to, invite your friends. November na yung next. Diba? Let's
Next
take
session, yes.
of
Thank you.
these
And
platforms.
yeah, and that's it, everyone. Actually, thank you very much for attending the session. Okay?
Thank you. Have a nice day.